It was April 30th, 2012. I was a wee little lad watching my favorite YouTuber, Sly Fox Hound, from the Creature Hub, which, doesn't look like it ended well for them.
It's been crazy. It's been awesome, and
RTX definitely shows every year how much the effect.
But hey, it looks like some of them got off to a different channel called Cow Chop. I wonder how they're... Oh. Well, anyway, I was watching Sly play this little indie game called FarSky, and it was an open-world survival game set underwater. And your ultimate goal is basically to leave this underwater landscape. It was basically described as Minecraft, but underwater.
How are you?
And some of you might have already picked up from seeing the gameplay footage right now that this game looks an awful lot like another certain underwater survival game. Some of you might have probably thought that this was just another copy of Subnautica, or maybe another game that Subnautica inspired. That's where you're wrong though, because this came first, like way earlier than Subnautica ever did. This is probably the first ever survival game set underwater, at least to my knowledge, and I think that's a pretty big deal. Since now that water-based survival games are extremely popular and Subnautica has been immensely successful, being the first of that kind of genre should hold some sort of weight. But if this is basically the first of its kind, why haven't you heard about it yet? Well, firstly, it's probably because this game does have its fair share of problems. Not only that, but it probably is because it got very much overshadowed by the bigger release of Subnautica. But I think the biggest reason why you've never heard of this game is because it's no longer in Steam. And the studio that was responsible for FarSky Interactive, just doesn't exist anymore. This is a story of FarSky Interactive and how it disappeared. FarSky Interactive is a game studio founded by Tim Spelker, a French game dev with a dream. A dream of becoming a successful game developer. And their studio was founded on, well, I'm actually not sure. There's very little information known about the studio itself, but the starting development of their first game, FarSky, started in February 2013. So let's just go with that. Now, FarSky was a passion project for Tim. And unlike hobbies like, reading, watching anime, and those types of things, he really wanted to go far with this one. So much so, in fact, that he wanted to live his passion and went out of his way to quit his day job and focus on game development. But imagine, he was only 23 at the time, so this was an extremely big risk for him. But he really did show how committed he was by updating the game almost in a daily basis. All of his devlogs have basically been nuked out of the internet, but from looking at his Twitter, or I guess X now, he was literally posting updates for the game in an almost daily basis. And finally, on August 2013, he finally published the first alpha of the game. Now, in today's gaming landscape, water-based open-world survival games are very common. Games like Stranded Deep, Raft, Sunken Land, and even the big release of Subnautica. But in 2013, they were basically non-existent. The reason is most likely because, well, historically speaking, water levels are just straight up terrible. It's always slow, clunky, and it just doesn't feel right to play. And Tim knew that, so he made a lot of adjustments to make movement way better and gameplay a lot more fun. And as for gameplay mechanics, Minecraft was the biggest inspiration for the game, and it shows, but I still wouldn't say that they're identical in any way, shape, or form. Pretty sure you guys can see that right now. On December 13, 2013, after refining the game some more and adding music and all of these things, FarSky has finally entered Beta 1.0. And this is also where the story gets interesting, as Subnautica finally enters the scene. On January 2014, Tim was browsing underwater reference images and found something interesting. He saw a bunch of concept art from a game called Subnautica. At first, this worried Tim a bit, saying, "Damn, I made a game way too close to another one without knowing about it." But then he realized that this game has yet to even begin development. That worried feeling that he had turned into anxiety when he recognized that the lead developer and his coworkers were following him in Twitter. X. He also found the lead developer's email on the buyers of his beta version. This left Tim devastated. He kept thinking to himself, maybe I showed it too early. He was afraid that he couldn't compete with a bigger development team, since he was just a solo developer with a bit of help from his friend for some game music. This really made him feel like he needed to finish the game earlier. This is probably because, to avoid the bigger competition, but also from being labeled as a ripoff. And funny enough, both of these things did come true in the end. So he sat down, rushed the development of the game, and pushed the game to Steam Greenlight when that was still a thing. I swear though, if Steam Greenlight was still implemented to this day, we wouldn't have this much hentai games in the trending tab every single day. But anyway, after a few weeks, it got greenlit, baby! It actually went so well, in fact, that 10k voters said yes and pushed FarSky to the 6th most popular game amidst thousands of games in Steam Greenlight at the time. And finally, on April 26, 2014, FarSky launched on Steam, and it was a success. According to developer, apparently it made 8 times the invested capital, which, holy crap, I'm pretty sure now it's pretty big. I mean, hey, it made me force my little brother to buy the game on Steam so that I could play it myself. And all I can say about the game is that it's a pretty solid experience, even in today's standard. It's a short but solid roughly 4 to 6 hours of gameplay that doesn't waste any of your time. Although if you're looking for an endless replayable game like Minecraft, then you should probably look elsewhere since this game doesn't have that much content. Like, this game does have a sandbox, like a full sandbox mode, but it's really dull. There's not that much to do, and you basically get the full experience already when you do the adventure mode. It was far more impressive at the time of its release, and I myself could never forget my experience playing this game. On a side note, Subnautica released on early access on December of 2014, and it exploded in popularity. So much so, in fact, that not only did it overshadow FarSky's release, it also made it so that FarSky looked like the ripoff. And on that note, Tim had this to say. I truly think there is no problem for unknown world company to get inspired from my game. Even big inspiration. And they surely wanted to make a game underwater. If we want video games to evolve, there needs to be inspiration. They made a successful game, and they truly deserve their success, no doubt about it. But the thing is, my game was not even finished. It was too early for me to see a way bigger company taking that much inspiration. And they never mentioned FarSky as an inspiration, surely because it's not in their interest. I saw some interviews where a journalist asked how they came up with the idea, and the response was the project leader came up with the idea, nothing more. Now, I personally don't think Subnautica copied FarSky, but I do agree with Tim's sentiment that games evolve by taking inspiration from other games. I just think that 2 developers thought of making an underwater exploration game at the same time, and one was just more ahead than the other. Now, did FarSky influence Subnautica's development in any way? If what Tim said was real, and sadly we have no proof of any of it, I even tried looking at the Twitter and I didn't see any followers of Subnautica's development team. But if what Tim said really was real, that they did buy the beta version of FarSky, then yeah, undoubtedly so. There is no way that a game this close to your own vision won't affect how you make your own game in any way. But as someone who's played both, I will say that I think these 2 games provide 2 different experiences. Both games have different faults and they both have different highlights. Now, although FarSky was overshadowed by Subnautica, you can't really call FarSky a failure, as it did octupled its capital and basically started the studio on a high note. It makes you wonder even more on how did a studio this high up in the sky just disappear? Well, let's see. At the end of FarSky's development, Tim felt very demotivated. This is largely because he just felt like he didn't know where to go from here. But the sales started to change as he began the development of Skybreak. Skybreak is an open-world survival crafting game on a stormy, abandoned planet filled with wild animal-like mechas. Now, FarSky was made in Java, but after realizing that working on a homemade engine was a pain for development, Tim started to learn how to use Unity and used Unity to develop Skybreak. And the thing is, Tim was also learning a lot more things. Tim admitted that he was very weak when it comes to game design, so he started reading a lot of books, watching a lot of dev talks regarding the, basic game design. He was also learning how to manage a company and to work with others because he finally hired another person to help him develop the game. Now, during Skybreak's early access release, the sales of the ship started to tear down. This is because of Tim's own inexperience. Tim was in the middle of learning so many things in a short amount of time. Things like company management and working with another person and developing the game. He was also learning game design while developing Skybreak, which was already in early access in Steam. This amount of learning caused Skybreak to keep changing. This amount of changes made the development cycle very turbulent with no clear direction. And because of all of these things, Tim's colleague could not trust him anymore and left at the end of the game's development. The game fully released on October 21, 2016 with mixed reviews. Tim has this to say about it. "I was heartbroken, I was left lonely, and I was not proud of Skybreak. I decided to move on and wanted one thing, not to reproduce the same game design mistakes I made for Skybreak. The game was a financial failure, only making 60% of the invested capital." Now, I never played this game. I knew about it and even wishlisted it on Steam, but never had the intention of actually buying it. It's just one of those games. It's just a game that didn't really look that great to me. And I'm not gonna lie, at the time, I was just not the biggest sci-fi fan and space games fan. And I mean, to this day, I'm not really that much of a fan of it. I'm more of a fantasy gamer. But enough of that, let's just head to their next game. And the game that would change FarSky Interactive forever. Tim started this one strong, and he was motivated to not make the same mistakes as the last projects. He hired Alexander for more manpower, then they started throwing ideas for a prototype. How about a first-person management game in a flooded city? That sounds interesting, but something about it feels like there's something missing. Well, how about adding a grappling hook? And that decision left such a big impact on the project that the whole prototype was basically scrapped and focused more on the grapple mechanic. This is where the third game actually comes into the picture, and that game is called Free Ones. Free Ones is a first-person platformer where you use the grappling hook as its main game mechanic. It's basically a parkour puzzle type game with a bit of a story to it. Now, Tim went ham on developing this game. Multiple devlogs, constant updates to the community. The development was more organized than both of his previous games combined. He said that the only thing that he really truly regrets in making this game was adding animated character dialogue scenes because it took too much time and it didn't really look great in the end. But overall, the development cycle was amazing here. And not only that, the passion was so overflowing. And the thing is, the game plays the same. This game is actually really fun, and I think is the most fun out of the 3 games that he released. This is actually the first time I've ever played this year. I didn't actually play this when it first came out, and it actually feels nice. You feel like you're about to hear every time you go up in the air. It does have its flaws, like reusing some of the puzzle multiple times, and sometimes it does feel very slippery. And, it obviously took a lot of inspiration from The Valley and Story About My Uncle and those types of games. But overall, I still think that it's a really good game. And Tim himself was very proud of the Free Ones. And with all of that being said, it actually flopped really bad. Tim was devastated. Even more than before because unlike Skybreak, everything went well in developing Free Ones. He really didn't expect it to fail this badly. Free Ones only made 25% of the invested capital of FarSky Interactive, signaling the end of the studio. After Free Ones, the team actually decided to create a new project, but Tim stated that there were three main issues. The first is that the company doesn't have enough money. This was because of the two financial failures of the two previous titles. The second was Tim himself didn't have enough strength to actually do this because of how good the development cycle of Free Ones was, but it actually flopped. And lastly, the indie scene is just way too crowded now. During the creation of the next project, the team went out for lunch one day, and Tim just started crying. That was the moment that they decided to pull the plug. He felt bad about the decision, but the moment that he stopped everything was the moment that he started to sleep normally again. The stress, anxiety, and the crippling sense of failure disappeared. He's now started to go back to working a regular job, leaving the once dreamy Sky behind and thinking of FarSky Interactive as a thing of the past. There are many indie studios out there that meet a similar fate to FarSky Interactive, where they started to burn so brightly so quickly but fizzle out just as fast. And I just witnessed one of those fireflies.